If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have said I was lucky to have such a close friend. We'd known each other since college. She was charming, outgoing, and always had some new crisis to share. I was the quieter one, the steady shoulder she could always lean on. She had this way of making me feel needed. If she was having a meltdown about her exams or stressing over work drama, I was her go-to person. Whenever her phone balance was low, she'd text me in the middle of the night, "Can you quickly recharge it? I'll pay you back tomorrow." The payback never came, but I told myself it didn't matter. When she asked for my Netflix password, it felt harmless. She loved movies, and I liked feeling like a generous friend. Eventually, it became routine. She'd log in, sometimes from multiple devices. I saw the notifications, but ignored them. I earned well enough to cover the cost, so it felt petty to make it an issue. Looking back, I realized this pattern had been there all along. Her taking, me giving, and me convincing myself that this was what friends did. I thought it made me kind. I thought it made us close. But all it did was set the stage for a small, ridiculous revenge that turned out to be the perfect way to log her out of my life. The real crack in our friendship appeared when I finally needed her to be there for me. I was going through one of the hardest times of my adult life. It wasn't anything glamorous or dramatic, just a slow, suffocating phase where everything felt heavy. Work was overwhelming. My family was dealing with health issues. I was exhausted, lonely, and running on autopilot. For the first time, I needed someone to listen, to sit with me in my frustration, to remind me that I wasn't alone. So I reached out. I called her after work one evening, my voice shaking. I started explaining how drained I felt. She was quiet for a moment. Then she sighed, in that dismissive way she sometimes did when she was bored. "You're always finding ways to be unhappy," she said, like it was the simplest fact in the world. I went quiet. I don't remember exactly what I mumbled before hanging up, but the shame settled in fast. I felt embarrassed for even trying to be vulnerable. I spent the rest of the evening replaying that moment, wondering if I was overreacting. Over the next few days, she didn't text or check in. Meanwhile, she kept using my Netflix. I'd get notifications at random hours. "Your account is being used on another device." Something about it started to grate on me. Here she was, too busy to even acknowledge my pain, but not too busy to stream the latest true crime docuseries on my dime. It wasn't about the subscription fee. It was the realization that our entire friendship was transactional, and the only person truly invested was me. That was when the first spark of pettiness flickered to life in the back of my mind. At first, I tried to let it go. I reminded myself that people can't always show up in the ways we want them to. But every time I saw the login notification, it felt like a tiny slap in the face. One evening, after an especially rough day at work, I opened Netflix to watch something comforting. The app immediately showed that too many devices were using the account. I knew exactly who it was. I closed the error message, set down the remote, and thought, why am I still letting her do this? It felt symbolic, like she was still occupying a space in my life she no longer deserved. She couldn't be bothered to send a text asking how I was, but she had no problem consuming what I paid for. I didn't want to confront her outright. I knew how that would go. She'd accuse me of overreacting or being dramatic. Instead, I decided on something small, something petty, something that would confuse her as much as her indifference had confused me. I opened my account settings and hit sign out of all devices. Seconds later, I imagined her screen blinking to the login page mid-episode. The thought made me smile. It wasn't revenge in the big cinematic sense, but it was my tiny way of reclaiming a sliver of respect. Of course, she noticed almost immediately. She texted, "Hey, did you change your password? I keep getting logged out." I waited a while before replying, just to enjoy the thought of her frustration. Then I sent her the new password. The next night, I did it again, and again. It was the gentlest, most hilarious form of revenge I could imagine, and it felt perfect. Once I committed to it, the process became almost therapeutic. Every time I felt angry or sad about how she dismissed me, I'd open Netflix, click sign out of all devices, and smile. She kept trying to troubleshoot. She asked if there was a glitch, She wondered if maybe Netflix had been hacked. She tried logging in with OTP verification. I'd share the code without hesitation, acting completely innocent. "Sure, here you go," I'd text, followed by the 6-digit code. She'd log back in. Within the hour, I'd log her out again. This went on for days. Each time, she seemed more baffled. At some point, she stopped asking for the password and just tried to reset it herself. But since the account was linked to my email and phone, she couldn't get past me. I never lied to her outright. I just never stopped the pattern. As soon as she settled back in to watch something, I'd yank the rug out from under her. It was petty, yes, but it was also deeply satisfying. She never accused me directly. Instead, she sent increasingly annoyed messages. "Netflix keeps logging me out. Are you sure your account is okay? Can you check with customer support?" I replied politely each time, claiming ignorance. In reality, I think she knew, or at least suspected. But she couldn't prove anything, and I refused to give her the satisfaction of a confrontation. Eventually, she tried the classic guilt angle. "I don't understand why you're being so weird. Is something wrong between us?" I almost laughed when I read that. I thought about how I had once sat on the phone with her for hours, helping her prep for her certification exams. How I had recharged her phone dozens of times. How I had given without expecting anything in return, until I finally did need something, and she couldn't be bothered. It wasn't just about Netflix. It was about realizing I was worth more than being someone's fallback option. I never explained it to her. I didn't need to. After a couple more weeks of being logged out over and over, she stopped trying. No more messages. No more OTP requests. It was over. I know it sounds petty. Maybe it was. But revenge is petty for a reason. Logging her out of Netflix didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the years I spent thinking we had something real. But it did remind me of something important. That boundaries matter. That you don't owe unlimited access, emotional or digital, to someone who can't be there for you in return. She's out of my Netflix and out of my life, and I'm okay with that. If you told me a month ago that the vacation I'd saved up for would turn into a spectacular dumpster fire, I would have laughed. I was genuinely excited about it. An escape from work stress, a chance to recharge, and maybe even create some good memories. More than that, I was trying to be a good friend. My best friend had been having a rough year. Her job was unstable. Her relationship was falling apart, and she sounded exhausted every time we spoke. When I suggested she come along, she hesitated. But I convinced her, thinking I was doing something kind. I covered most of the costs, flights, accommodation, even a few meals. It wasn't cheap, but I kept telling myself it was worth it to help someone I cared about. What I didn't realize was that inviting someone in crisis doesn't mean you're going to get a grateful, considerate companion. Sometimes, it just means you're going to be stuck in close quarters with someone determined to infect everything around them with their misery. This was supposed to be the trip of the year. Instead, it was an exhausting lesson in why you don't bring messy people on vacation, unless you want them to bring their mess too. The red flags started early, but I tried to ignore them. The first day, she complained about the hotel room. It was too small, even though it was larger and nicer than any place either of us had stayed in before. Then it was the restaurant I picked for our first dinner. She didn't like the menu, said it was pretentious. By day 2, every little thing was an opportunity for her to sulk or snap. If the weather wasn't perfect, she'd pout. If I wanted to do something she didn't care for, she'd roll her eyes and call it boring. It was like traveling with a teenage diva in a grown woman's body. I tried to be understanding. I reminded myself that she was going through a lot back home. Maybe she was just overwhelmed and needed time to decompress. But nothing seemed to help. Even when I suggested activities I knew she'd enjoy, she found ways to be negative. We went to a spa one afternoon, and she complained the massage oil smelled weird. We tried sightseeing, and she criticized the crowds, the heat, the price of everything. The worst part was how entitled she acted about the money. She never once offered to pay for anything. When I gently hinted that it would be nice to split a meal or cover an Uber, she acted offended, like I was being tacky for even bringing it up. But what finally broke my patience was her attitude toward me. I'd hoped this trip might be a chance for us to reconnect and support each other. Instead, she treated me like I was just her personal travel sponsor. She rarely asked if I was enjoying myself, never thanked me for footing the bill, and acted annoyed whenever I tried to talk about something that mattered to me. On day 5, we got into a small argument about what time to leave for dinner. She sighed and muttered, "This is why you're always alone. You're exhausting." I stood there, stunned. All the resentment I'd been swallowing came boiling up. That was the moment I decided I was done letting her ruin every part of this trip. I didn't yell at her. I didn't even respond right away. I just nodded and said I'd see her later. I needed time to cool down and to think. Back in the hotel room, I lay on the bed, replaying everything. The complaints, the entitlement, the digs at my personality. I couldn't believe I'd spent so much money to make her feel better, only to have her treat me like an inconvenience. It wasn't about wanting her to grovel or beg forgiveness. I just wanted her to appreciate that this trip wasn't free for me, financially or emotionally. But clearly that wasn't going to happen. So I thought, fine. If she insists on being ungrateful, the least I can do is give myself one small measure of satisfaction. I started scrolling through our airline's website. We were flying home the next morning, and I remembered that I'd booked both of our tickets together. That meant I had control over the reservations. The idea came to me in a flash of mischievous clarity. I knew she hated cramped spaces. She always requested aisle seats to avoid feeling trapped. She also had a mild phobia of airplane bathrooms. I checked the seat map. Sure enough, there was a perfect spot available. The middle seat, last row, right next to the restroom. I could practically smell the stale air and hear the flush. I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. I switched her seat, reconfirmed my own by the window several rows ahead, and closed my laptop with a satisfied little smirk. It wasn't grand revenge, but it was petty and it was mine. That night, I said nothing. She stayed glued to her phone, ignoring me except to ask if I'd paid the hotel bill. Of course I had. In the morning, we packed up in near silence. She didn't notice anything unusual as we checked out and grabbed a cab to the airport. At the check-in kiosk, she seemed distracted. She was scrolling Instagram while I printed our boarding passes. I handed hers over with a neutral smile. She barely glanced at it before stuffing it in her bag. Security was quick. We made it to the gate with time to spare. She finally looked at her pass to confirm her seat. "Wait," she said, frowning. "You picked our seats, right?" I nodded, doing my best to look innocent. "Why am I in row 32? That's, like, the back." "Oh," I said lightly. Must have been all that was left. She didn't seem convinced, but she didn't argue further. Maybe she thought it wasn't worth the energy, or maybe she was too tired to care. Either way, I relished the knowledge that in a couple of hours, she'd be wedged between strangers, next to the bathroom, for the entire flight home. It was a tiny comfort after an otherwise wasted week. Boarding started. I waited until her group was called, then walked to my own seat near the front. I settled in by the window and watched passengers file past. A few minutes later, she trudged down the aisle, stopping when she realized just how far back she was going. I caught her eye briefly. She looked bewildered, maybe even a little betrayed. For 1 second, I almost felt guilty. Almost. When the doors closed and we started taxiing, I pictured her wedged between a couple of strangers, already annoyed that she couldn't lean into the aisle. I imagined the steady stream of passengers shuffling past her to the bathroom, the smell of disinfectant, the constant flush. Somewhere during the flight, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through photos from the trip. Most of them made me cringe. I couldn't believe how much I'd tolerated to keep the peace. I didn't check on her when we landed. She didn't look for me either. We both collected our luggage in silence, standing several feet apart. She didn't thank me. I didn't wish her a safe trip home. I hailed my own cab and didn't look back. Later that evening, she sent me a single text. "Seriously? The bathroom seat? Wow." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. It wasn't some epic revenge that would make a movie plot, but it was enough. She spent the flight stewing in discomfort. I spent it in peace, finally free of her negativity. That trip taught me one of the most important lessons of adulthood. Generosity should have limits. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, and you shouldn't bankrupt your own sanity trying. She's out of my life now. I have no plans to change that, and the next time I take a vacation, I'm going alone.